The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew to Galilee. He left Nazareth and went to live in Capernaum by the sea, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali, that what had been said through Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled. Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way to the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sit in darkness have seen a great light. On those dwelling in a land overshadowed by death, light has arisen. From that time on, Jesus began to preach and say, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." As he was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and his brother Andrew, casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. He said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. He walked along from there and saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. He called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. He went around all of Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and curing every disease and illness among the people. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I've been reflecting upon when I was first discerning and heading into formation for the diaconate, how we were pondering, Suzanne and I, like where this fits in our life with young boys in the family and trying to raise them and everything. And I remember thinking kind of through my own plan on this of how when I was entering the years until ordination, everything would fit in while the boys were still in grade school. None of them would be in high school. I wouldn't miss any of those important high school moments or events or anything like that. And then God showed how when we make plans, he laughs. Because after the first year, enough men had left our class that we had to be held back a year and wait for some more men to join us. And it pushed Thomas into high school before I was ordained. And I realized our response to God's call is never on our own timeline. And maybe the immediacy of his call and the answer that he expects of us is just something that we have to accept with grace and lean into and live. And we see that immediacy today in the gospel when Jesus calls the first apostles. We hear that at once Andrew and Peter left their nets and followed him. We hear that immediately James and John left their boat and their father. Not, let me think about it, not after I finish this, not once my life is in order, at once, immediately. And these weren't irresponsible guys. These were fishermen, businessmen. They weren't making reckless decisions, but they left everything. They left their livelihood, their nets, their income, their trade. They left their security. They left the boat. They left their means of survival. James and John left their family. They left their father, relationships, obligations. Certainly this wasn't easy. It wasn't convenient. But when Jesus called, we hear how they responded immediately. In the first reading, Isaiah, the prophet, gives us this perspective. He says, "The people who walk in darkness have seen a great light." When you've been walking in darkness, I remember this from when I was a boy and a scout on hikes, and then suddenly you see light. You don't hesitate, you seek it, you run towards it, you move towards the light. And the disciples recognized something in Jesus. Not just a good teacher, not just a prophet, but the light, the answer to what they had been waiting and hoping and praying for their whole lives. And when you encounter the light, delaying is dangerous. Every moment that you wait is another moment in darkness. St. Augustine wrote, "God is always trying to give good things to us, but our hands are too full to receive them." The disciples dropped their nets from their hands. They emptied their hands so that they could receive what Jesus was offering. We've been rescued by Jesus' saving work, by our baptism. But are our hands too full to keep receiving and to do something? Why do we sometimes hesitate when Jesus calls us? We're often really good at eventually or someday or when things calm down a little bit. But how does Jesus call us today? Where is our seashore? He calls us through things like a prompting in prayer, a need that we see in someone in our community, a sacrifice that we know that we should make, a relationship that we need to heal, or a sin that we need to confess. And we'll say, soon, not yet. Let me get everything in order first. Let me get ready. But the problem is we're never ready. If the disciples waited until they were ready, they'd still be mending nets. We wouldn't have a church, perhaps. Pope John Paul II said, and I love this quote, it hangs in a frame in my office over in the Parish Life Center. It is Jesus who stirs in you the desire to do something great with your life, the will to follow an ideal, the refusal to allow yourself to be grounded down by mediocrity. Jesus did that with the apostles, and he wants to do it with us. Chris likes when we use the language of the Rescue Project in our religious education and when we're preaching. In the Rescue Project, they say, rescued people like us rescue people. We go into action. And it's been said that Jesus doesn't call the qualified, but he qualifies the called. One of my brothers in formation used to say that all the time. But we have to respond at once, immediately. And yet, immediate obedience costs something. It costs comfort. It costs control. Sometimes it costs what other people think of us. But look at what Jesus promises. I will make you fishers of men. He doesn't just call us away from something. He calls us to something even greater, a bigger purpose, a deeper meaning for our life. Not just catching fish, but bringing others to the light, rescuing people. In the second reading, St. Paul writes, and this is challenging language, let there be no divisions among you. One way that division happens is avoidance or delay, when some of us respond immediately and others don't. When some say yes and others say not yet. You might say that the church isn't divided as much by theology as by commitment. Some are all in, and yet others are lukewarm, or 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Unity, that St. Paul writes about, requires urgency. We all need to respond together. I think about things like the Capital Campaign Project that we're working on as a parish. I think about the wonderful example this week of how when the overnight warming location opened up and we issued a call for help for things that they needed, within a day we had a whole cartload of things to take. And within another day we had another cartload of things to take. Immediacy, unity in action. I love the quote from Pope Benedict XVI as well. The world promises you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. Comfort keeps us in the boat, but greatness requires us to leave it at once. So here's the question for this week. What is Jesus calling you to right now? Not someday, not eventually, but right now. Maybe it's finally having that hard conversation with a loved one. Maybe it's making that sacrifice that you've been avoiding, or forgiving someone who hurt you, or going to confession, or serving in a new ministry that you've been feeling a call to, or changing a habit that's keeping you from Jesus. Whatever it is, you know what it is. The Spirit tells your heart and tells your conscience. And the disciples this week in the gospel teach us that the call requires an immediate response, not a perfect response, not a fully prepared response, but an immediate one. At once, they left their nets and followed him. What net are you holding on to that Jesus is asking you to drop? And will you respond at once? May God give us this grace.